Grants and loans are really the two main types of how official development assistance can be given to developing countries. But still, it means that it's building up debt. There are already 3.3 billion people living in countries that are spending more on interest than on education or health.
Hello, this is the Weekly Tradecast, a podcast brought to you by UN Trade and Development. I'm Sarah Toms. We're exploring how major events are shaping trade and development and how that affects billions of people around the world. This week, we're looking at international aid and how more needs to flow to countries that need it most to boost economies and people. Official development assistance, or ODA for short, is more than just cash. The grants, loans and technical assistance from various governments can support societies with access to electricity, clean water, healthcare and education. Along with remittances and foreign direct investment, ODA is one of the most stable kinds of external financing for developing countries, especially in times of crisis. The good news is ODA jumped to record levels in 2022, even during a pandemic. But developing regions actually saw ODA shrink by 2%, affecting more than 70 countries and nearly 3 billion people. As conflict, geopolitics and financial pressures reshape priorities, the aid landscape is undergoing huge shifts that could undermine development in many countries. Well, joining me now to talk about the challenges and some ways forward is Julia Grubler. Julia is an economist with the technical team of the UN Global Crisis Response Group, whose recent report, Aid Under Pressure, looks at the shifts in ODA flows. And when she's not working, art also plays an important role in Julia's life. She plays an instrument, the alpine zither, and sings, dances, and paints. Well, that sounds interesting, Julia. Welcome to the show. And how important is official development assistance? How do countries get it and how do they use it?
So, good morning and thank you for having me. Official development assistance is government aid with the specific purpose of economic development and increasing the welfare in developing countries. So, to be eligible to be a recipient of official development assistance, countries or territories have to be classified as low income or middle income according to the World Bank. And normally what you see is the wealthier economies become, the less important official development assistance is, because then they have also access to other resources, whether it's domestic resources, private and public, as well as other external resources. But for the most vulnerable countries, it can be a very, very crucial source. So if there is just one feature that I would like to highlight on official development assistance, it is its stability. So it is known to be one of the most stable and most predictable sources of external financing, especially during crisis. And we saw that, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, very clearly. Other external resources did decline, but official development assistance to developing countries continued to increase.
That's really interesting because why then is the flow of aid slowing to many places that need it most? If more than 70 developing countries are seeing less, then where are those record levels of development aid going?
So as you correctly said, we do see record levels in official development assistance. And actually 2022 was not the only year. The recent statistics of the OECD point out that 2023 has been the 5th consecutive year where official development assistance has set a record level. But at the same time, we also do see that emergencies and especially international crises are shifting or are reshuffling the priorities of donor countries. And that is particularly true when the donor countries are affected themselves directly. So just to give you an example, we see that when donor countries are facing a large number of asylum seekers and refugees. We saw that in 2015 with the start of, or in the context of the war in Iraq and in Syria. We also saw that again in 2022 with the start of the war in Ukraine. So what we do see is an increase in official development assistance that is spent within the donor countries for the people that are arriving there. And even in 2023, for some of the donor countries, this amount that is spent for asylum seekers and refugees amounts to a quarter of the total official development assistance. So overall, with this shift from longer-term development assistance towards crisis responses, we do see an overall increase in global official development assistance, but at the same time, the amount that arrives in developing countries did decrease by 2%. And for the least developed countries, for the poorest countries in the world, it decreased even more by 3.5% in 2022.
There's definitely a shift, as you said, in the aid landscape, and that's partly due to perhaps conflicts. But what other forces are at work, and what impact will this have on the average person, say, in a developing country?
The one I was already touching upon is this shift from sustainable development finance towards more focus on crisis responses. Just to give you an example of what this means for people in developing countries, we do see an increase in food aid, which is super important, but at the same time, we do see a decrease in agricultural development. Or we do see an increase in humanitarian aid, and we see an increase in spending for refugees and asylum seekers. But at the same time, we do see that flows to least developed countries are decreasing. Another shift concerns who is giving official development assistance. The biggest donors are still bilateral donors. So bilateral, it's governments that are giving the money. But we do see a shift during crisis, and especially since COVID, towards multilateral donors, particularly development banks. And that leads to the third shift, that is, we see a shift in the type of official development assistance that is given, away from grants and towards loans. And we do see this shift for every developing region, and this raises concerns regarding debt sustainability or the overall debt burden of developing countries.
What does a move in ODA from grants to loans mean for developing countries and their overall relationship with the global financial system?
So grants and loans are really the two main types of how official development assistance can be given to developing countries. And grants simply mean that there is no provision for repayment, and there is no interest payment. Whereas for loans, you have to pay it back at some point, and you have to pay interest. So it's clear that these kind of loans they're considered as concessional loans, or also called soft loans, which means that it's much cheaper than when borrowing from commercial banks. But still, it means that it's building up debt. And as we have highlighted in the UN report on the world of debt, there are already 3.3 billion people living in countries that are spending more on interest than on education or health, really the fundamentals of development. So adding further debt when countries are still struggling from the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic with a reduced fiscal space is really an enormous development challenge.
Well, it is good news, however, that gender-related aid's been growing recently, but overall the UN says a lot more is needed to meet gender equality targets in the Sustainable Development Goals. So what does this gap mean for women, inclusion and equity in development overall?
Indeed, much more money and a lot more effort and political will is needed to achieve gender equality. So there was an UNCTAD study that showed that $360 billion per year would be needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality. Or another study points out that with the progress that we're currently making, it would take 300 years to achieve gender equality. So this is quite frustrating. So for me, then it was super exciting to see that the OECD and the donor countries are making an effort to analyze their official development assistance through a gender lens. And there's a very positive development. We do see that over the past decade, gender-related official development assistance has doubled to $52 billion in 2022. However, the biggest increases come from loans. So here we also see that they have not been spared from the general trend that we saw for overall development assistance, away from grants towards loans. And most of it, so 90% actually of it, concerns gender mainstreaming. Only 10% of the aid that is gender-related really has gender equality as the primary target.
How can we address these shortfalls and ensure that official development assistance keeps flowing to developing countries and in a sustainable way in the future?
Well, there are multiple angles how to address these shortfalls. And the first one, that is the easiest to explain but really hard to achieve, is the question of how much is given. So already in 1970, developed countries committed themselves to provide 0.7% of the gross national income in the form of official development assistance. So we said that already 5 years in a row, we now are hitting record levels in aid, but still we're just below 0.4% of gross national income. Now you might say, okay, 0.4% or 0.7%, that doesn't sound like too much, but actually in actual terms, it means more than 100 billion US dollars. So it still does matter. The other angle is what it is used for. And I will try to really make the point that we see cascading crises that are competing with long-term development priorities. And actually, this is another argument to push for the 0.7% target because the sources are simply scarce. So if you increase the budget that you have available, then maybe we can more easily accommodate both addressing emerging crises as well as longer-term development. And the third point is the direction. So we know that different crises lead to different priorities. So I would hope that by raising awareness about these trends, that we can actually reverse it, so that in the end, official development assistance can be what I praised it in the beginning to be. That is the most stable and predictable source of development finance, especially during crisis and especially for the most vulnerable countries.
Okay, well, Julia, thank you. That was really informative. That was UN Trade and Development's Julia Grubler, who was this week's guest. Tune into the weekly Tradecast next week and every week for more insights on the most pressing issues around the world of trade and development. And there's even more on our website, unctad.org. I'm Sarah Toms in Geneva. Goodbye for now.